was rising over a colorful cartoon house where two little budgies lived. Their names were Greenie and Bluey. Greenie was a bright green bird who always had big ideas and loved to show off. Bluey was a soft blue bird who was playful and curious about everything. On this morning the two friends were sitting on their perch waiting for something exciting to happen. Greenie looked straight toward the viewers and said in a cheerful voice, "Hey friends, you are just in time to see the funniest day of our lives." Bluey flapped his wings and added with a grin, "Yes, today there will be adventure, laughter, and maybe even some surprises." The two budgies laughed together and the scene opened like the start of a grand cartoon episode. The first adventure began at breakfast time. On the table near their perch stood a large bowl filled with shiny seeds. Greenie spotted the biggest seed sitting right on top. He puffed out his chest and jumped forward, declaring loudly, "This one is mine." Bluey was quick to respond, "Whoever gets it first is the real winner." And with that the breakfast turned into a playful battle. The two budgies hopped around the bowl bumping wings and giving each other silly looks. They pecked at the seeds while making little squeaky sounds that filled the room with energy. A small toy chicken that was sitting nearby fell to the ground with a funny bounce, making the whole moment even more comical. But then something unexpected happened. The biggest seed slipped off the edge of the bowl and rolled to the floor. Both Greenie and Bluey froze and stared at it in shock. After a long pause they looked at each other and then burst into laughter. Greenie said, "Maybe it is better if we share." Bluey nodded and replied, "Teamwork is always the best work." The two friends flew down together and shared the seed happily. Their first little challenge of the day had turned into a reminder that life is more fun when you do things together. After the excitement of the breakfast adventure, the two budgies hopped back onto their perch with satisfied little chirps. The morning sunlight was streaming through the window and lighting up the whole room in a warm golden glow. Greenie was busy cleaning his feathers with quick, neat movements while Bluey was still buzzing with energy. He wanted something new to explore and he was not ready to sit still. As Bluey hopped along the table, his eyes suddenly caught the shine of something in the corner. It was a small mirror standing upright against a stack of books. The mirror had a smooth silver frame that gleamed in the light. Bluey tilted his head from side to side and squawked softly, "What is this shiny window doing here?" He hopped closer and stared straight into the glass. To his surprise, another budgie was staring back at him. Bluey gasped, "Oh Greenie, look, there is a new bird in the house. And he looks very friendly." Greenie glanced up from his feathers with a puzzled face. "A new bird? What are you talking about?" Bluey tapped the glass with his beak and exclaimed, "Look at him. He is the same size as me and he has the most beautiful feathers." Greenie finally flew down and landed beside him. He took one look at the mirror and instantly realized what was happening. "That is not another bird, silly. That is your reflection." But Bluey was too excited to listen. The reflection budgie had tilted its head exactly as he had. To Bluey it looked like the stranger was copying his every move. He puffed out his chest proudly. "This bird thinks I am a leader. He is following everything I do." Bluey began to dance. He hopped left then right, flapping his wings like a performer on stage. The budgie in the mirror danced with him step for step. Bluey looked amazed. "Wow, he is a great dancer. I think he wants to be my friend." He began to chirp a little tune and bobbed his head. The mirror budgie chirped back at the exact same time. Bluey squealed with joy. "He even knows my song." Greenie sat on the table shaking his head and trying not to laugh too loudly. He had never seen Bluey so serious about something so silly. After a few minutes, Greenie decided to play along. He said in a mock serious voice, "Well, if this is your new friend, then maybe you should introduce yourself." Bluey nodded firmly. "Good idea." He bowed politely to the mirror bird. "Hello, friend, my name is Bluey. What is yours?" The reflection bowed at the same time, but of course no voice came back. Bluey blinked. "Oh, maybe he is shy. That is all right. I will do the talking." Now Bluey strutted back and forth in front of the glass, telling long stories about how he and Greenie had just defeated the mighty breakfast seed. Every time he moved, the reflection copied him exactly. When Bluey stopped to scratch his head, the reflection scratched too. Bluey gasped again. "Greenie, he knows everything about me. We think the same. We move the same. This is amazing." Greenie finally burst out laughing. "Bluey, you are talking to yourself. That bird is you. It is only a mirror." Bluey looked at Greenie with wide shocked eyes. "No way. How can that be?" He turned back to the mirror and waved his wing. The reflection waved too. He lifted one foot. The reflection lifted one foot as well. For a moment Bluey stood frozen. Slowly the truth began to dawn on him. His cheeks turned pink under his feathers and he lowered his head. "Oh, you mean I have been dancing and singing to myself this whole time?" Greenie laughed so hard he nearly fell off the table. "Yes, my friend, but you were very entertaining. Maybe we should charge tickets next time." Bluey covered his face with his wing in embarrassment. "Oh no, I thought I had made a brand new best friend." But then he peeked again into the mirror and saw his own face smiling back at him. He chuckled softly. "Well, maybe this friend is not so bad. After all, he does everything I do. That means he will never let me down." The two Budgies ended up sitting side by side in front of the mirror. Greenie gave Bluey a little nudge and said gently, "Sometimes the funniest discoveries are the ones that teach us about ourselves." Bluey nodded. "Maybe you are right. I guess my best friend has been here all along." They both laughed together as the camera pulled back, showing the tiny birds admiring their reflections in the bright mirror. The scene faded out with a playful tune and the promise of more adventures waiting just around the corner. After the mirror incident, Greenie and Bluey were still chuckling. Bluey was slightly embarrassed, but Greenie kept teasing him with jokes like, "Remember your new best friend in the mirror." Bluey puffed his feathers and replied with a grin, "At least my new friend dances better than you." The two laughed together and hopped around the table. As they explored the room, their eyes fell on something new. Sitting on the table near the edge was a small red toy car. Its plastic body shone under the light and its little wheels were ready to roll. Bluey's eyes lit up with excitement. "What is this shiny thing? It looks like some kind of nest with wheels." Greenie tilted his head. "I think it is one of those human toys. Maybe it is for racing." Without waiting for an answer, Bluey hopped straight into the car. His tiny claws gripped the smooth plastic seat and his wings flapped as if he were preparing for takeoff. "Look at me, Greenie, I am driving." Greenie laughed. "Driving? You do not even know how this thing works." But before he could finish the sentence, the car began to move. Bluey had leaned too far forward and the car started rolling down the slope of the table. His eyes grew wide. "Greenie, help! The car is alive!" Greenie darted into the car too, trying to balance it. The two Budgies now sat together inside the toy, which rolled faster and faster. The background music in the scene shifted into a playful racing tune as the car bounced over books and zoomed past pencils. Bluey shouted over the noise. This is amazing. We are flying without wings. Greenie clutched the edge and muttered. More like crashing without brakes. The car hit the corner of a notebook and soared briefly into the air before landing again. Both Budgies wobbled but managed to stay inside. The car made its way across the table like a wild roller coaster. It slid past a stack of crayons, then bumped against a cup which spilled a little water. The splash startled the birds but also added to their laughter. Bluey leaned out of the side like a race car driver. Faster, faster. Greenie rolled his eyes. Faster. Are you trying to break our feathers? They were about to reach the edge of the table when Greenie flapped his wings hard, creating enough resistance to slow the car slightly. The toy wobbled dangerously, but instead of falling straight off, it veered onto a closed book that formed a gentle ramp. The car zoomed down the book and landed safely on the carpet below. The landing was bumpy but soft. Both Budgies tumbled out in a heap. For a moment they lay there stunned. Then Bluey burst into laughter. Did you see that? We flew like superheroes. Greenie got up, shaking the dust off his feathers. More like we nearly became pancakes. But even he could not hide his smile. The thrill of the ride had filled him with a strange excitement. Bluey climbed back into the toy car and flapped his wings. Let us go again. This time I will drive better. Greenie hesitated, then sighed. All right, but this time I am the co-pilot. They both settled into the car again. Bluey pretended to hold an invisible steering wheel while Greenie gave directions. Turn left. Now slow down. Watch out for the pencil. The two laughed so hard that even their chirps echoed like giggles. They managed to guide the car around little obstacles on the carpet, making it feel like a real racetrack. Sometimes the car tipped to one side, but with quick flaps of their wings they balanced it again. After several minutes of racing, they finally rolled gently to a stop against a soft cushion. The car rested there like it had reached the finish line. The two Budgies hopped out, panting happily. Bluey declared proudly, "We just completed the Budgie Grand Prix." Greenie nodded and stretched his wings. "And we survived. That is the most important part." They both perched on the cushion, watching the car rest peacefully. Bluey smiled. "I think this car might be our new playground." Greenie agreed. "Yes, but next time let us wear helmets." As the scene closed, the camera zoomed out, showing the tiny red car parked on the carpet with two cheerful Budgies beside it. The playful racing music faded into soft, cheerful notes while the narrator voice whispered. Adventure number 3 was complete, but many more surprises were still waiting for Greenie and Bluey. After the thrilling toy car adventure, Greenie and Bluey perched on the cushion, still catching their breath. Their feathers were slightly ruffled from the ride, but their eyes sparkled with excitement. Bluey touched his chest proudly. "We should enter a real race one day." Greenie chuckled. "If humans ever make a Budgie racing league, we will be the champions." The two burst into laughter again. Just then, a sweet smell drifted through the air. Bluey twitched his nose. "Do you smell this, Greenie?" "It smells juicy." Greenie tilted his head. "That is not seed. It smells bigger, sweeter." The two hopped toward the kitchen counter where a plate of fruit had been left out. The plate looked like a treasure chest filled with colors. There were shiny red apples, bunches of grapes, and slices of bright yellow bananas. Bluey's eyes widened. "Look at that apple. It is like a giant mountain." Greenie flapped up and landed on top of the apple. He looked down at Bluey from above. "And I am the king of the mountain." He puffed out his feathers like a hero. Bluey giggled and replied, "Well, every king needs a challenger." He pecked at the apple and tried to climb up too. The apple was round and slippery. Bluey kept sliding back down, which made Greenie laugh harder. Finally, Bluey gave up and hopped toward the grapes. "These are more my size," he said, nudging one grape with his beak. The grape rolled across the plate and down onto the table. Bluey chased after it, pushing it like a tiny football player. Soon, the grape game turned into a full match. Bluey kicked the grape with his beak and Greenie blocked it with his wings like a goalkeeper. Bluey shouted in his chirpy voice, "Goal!" and Greenie protested, No, that was out of bounds." The two Budgies ran around the plate, chasing grapes, knocking them across the table, and squeaking in excitement. At one point, Bluey pushed the grape so hard that it rolled right off the table. Both birds gasped and flew down quickly. The grape had landed safely on the floor and was still rolling. Bluey darted forward, wings stretched, and stopped it just before it reached the wall. He stood proudly on top of it like a football star who had scored the winning goal. Greenie clapped his wings together. "Well done. You saved the game." But their fruit adventure did not end there. Greenie returned to the plate and pecked at a banana slice. The soft fruit squished under his beak, leaving a sticky mess on his feathers. He shook his head and made a face. "This one is too mushy." Bluey laughed so hard he nearly fell over. "You look like you just dipped your head in glue." To get even, Greenie flicked a bit of banana at Bluey. It landed right on his wing. Bluey gasped dramatically. "A food fight!" He pecked at another grape and sent it rolling toward Greenie. The grape bounced off Greenie's chest and rolled back across the table. The two birds exchanged looks and then burst into laughter. Soon they were playfully tossing and pecking bits of fruit at each other, turning the kitchen counter into a battlefield of apple slices and grapes. Finally, tired but happy, they sat side by side on the edge of the fruit plate. Their beaks were sticky and their feathers were messy, but they looked content. Bluey chirped softly. This was the tastiest adventure yet. Greenie nodded. And also the messiest. But sometimes the best fun comes from a little mess. The scene ended with the two Budgies sharing a small piece of apple peacefully. They nibbled at it together, heads bobbing in rhythm, while the background music softened into a gentle, cheerful tune. The camera zoomed out, showing the fruit plate now scattered and slightly messy but glowing with the warmth of their playful adventure. Narrator voice faded in. Greenie and Bluey had discovered that food could be more than just breakfast. It could be a game, a challenge, and even a comedy show. And with every new discovery, their bond as friends grew stronger. After the thrilling toy car adventure, Greenie and Bluey perched on the cushion, still catching their breath. Their feathers were slightly ruffled from the ride, but their eyes sparkled with excitement. Bluey puffed his chest proudly. "We should enter a real race one day." Greenie chuckled. "If humans ever make a Budgie racing league, we will be the champions." The two burst into laughter again. Just then, a sweet smell drifted through the air. Bluey twitched his nose. "Do you smell this, Greenie?" "It smells juicy." Greenie tilted his head. "That is not seeds. It smells bigger, sweeter." The two hopped toward the kitchen counter where a plate of fruit had been left out. The plate looked like a treasure chest filled with colors. There were shiny red apples, bunches of grapes, and slices of bright yellow bananas. Bluey's eyes widened. Look at that apple. It is like a giant mountain. Greenie flapped up and landed on top of the apple. He looked down at Bluey from above. And I am the king of the mountain. He puffed out his feathers like a hero. Bluey giggled and replied, well, every king needs a challenger. He pecked at the apple and tried to climb up too. The apple was round and slippery. Bluey kept sliding back down, which made Greenie laugh harder. Finally, Bluey gave up and hopped toward the grapes. These are more my size, he said, nudging one grape with his beak. The grape rolled across the plate and down onto the table. Bluey chased after it, pushing it like a tiny football player. Soon, the grape game turned into a full match. Bluey kicked the grape with his beak and Greenie blocked it with his wings like a goalkeeper. Bluey shouted in his chirpy voice, go, and Greenie protested, no, that was out of bounds. The two Budgies ran around the plate, chasing grapes, knocking them across the table, and squeaking in excitement. At one point, Bluey pushed the grape so hard that it rolled right off the table. Both birds gasped and flew down quickly. The grape had landed safely on the floor and was still rolling. Bluey darted forward, wings stretched, and stopped it just before it reached the wall. He stood proudly on top of it like a football star who had scored the winning goal. Greenie clapped his wings together. Well done, you saved the game, but their fruit adventure did not end there. Greenie returned to the plate and pecked at a banana slice. The soft fruit squished under his beak, leaving a sticky mess on his feathers. He shook his head and made a face. This one is too mushy. Bluey laughed so hard he nearly fell over. You look like you just dipped your head in glue. To get even, Greenie flicked a bit of banana at Bluey. It landed right on his wing. Bluey gasped dramatically. A food fight. He pecked at another grape and sent it rolling toward Greenie. The grape bounced off Greenie's chest and rolled back across the table. The two birds exchanged looks and then burst into laughter. Soon they were playfully tossing and pecking bits of fruit at each other, turning the kitchen counter into a battlefield of apple slices and grapes. Finally, tired but happy, they sat side by side on the edge of the fruit plate. Their beaks were sticky and their feathers were messy, but they looked content. Bluey chirped softly. This was the tastiest adventure yet. Greenie nodded. And also the messiest. But sometimes the best fun comes from a little mess. The scene ended with the two Budgies sharing a small piece of apple peacefully. They nibbled at it together, heads bobbing in rhythm, while the background music softened into a gentle, cheerful tune. The camera zoomed out, showing the fruit plate now scattered and slightly messy but glowing with the warmth of their playful adventure. The day had already been filled with more excitement than most Budgies could ever dream of. There had been breakfast battles, mirror dances, toy car racing, fruit football, and even a box cave mystery. Greenie and Bluey were perched on their stand, their feathers glowing in the soft afternoon light. They both looked a little tired, but their eyes sparkled with the hunger for one more adventure. Bluey stretched his wings and chirped. You know, after so many discoveries today, we should celebrate. Greenie tilted his head. Celebrate. How? Bluey hopped up and down with energy. With a concert. We will make music for everyone to hear. Greenie raised an eyebrow. Music. We are just two little Budgies. Bluey fluffed his feathers proudly. Two little Budgies who can chirp louder than a whole orchestra. Greenie chuckled. Well, I suppose we could give it a try. The two flew onto the table where the shiny bell from the box still rested. Bluey tapped it gently with his beak. Ding! The sound rang bright and clear. Greenie clapped his wings together to create a beat. Soon Bluey was chirping in rhythm while Greenie added whistles and trills. Their tiny voices filled the room like the notes of a playful band. Bluey pretended the spoon on the counter was a microphone and sang into it. Greenie bobbed his head and made drumming sounds by pecking lightly on a plastic cup. The music grew louder, funnier, and more joyful with every note. It was not perfect, but it was alive with spirit. Suddenly the room felt too small for their grand performance. Bluey stopped and looked at Greenie. Let us take our concert outside. The garden is big, and maybe the other birds will join us. Greenie hesitated for only a second before nodding. That sounds like the perfect finale. Together they flew toward the open window. The warm evening breeze greeted them as they spread their wings wide. Out they went, soaring into the golden light of the setting sun. The sky was painted with orange and pink streaks, and the garden below looked like a soft green carpet. They landed on a wooden branch in the middle of the garden. Flowers of every color surrounded them. Bees buzzed lazily, and butterflies floated like living confetti. Bluey chirped happily. This is our stage. Greenie agreed. Yes, the whole garden is waiting for us. Bluey rang the little bell he had carried from the house. Its sound echoed sweetly across the plants. Then Greenie started a slow rhythmic beat with his chirps. Bluey followed with a high cheerful tune. Together they built their song, each note climbing higher than the last. Other creatures began to notice. A pair of sparrows landed on a nearby bush, tilting their heads in interest. A squirrel paused with a nut in its paws and listened. Even the butterflies seemed to hover closer as if dancing to the music. Bluey puffed his feathers and sang louder. Greenie added playful whistles that rose and fell like waves. The sparrows joined in with soft chirps, blending into the melody. The garden was slowly turning into an audience and a choir all at once. The two Budgies were shining with joy. Their music was not just sound anymore. It was a story of their day. The beat carried the rush of the toy car ride. The whistles echoed the silliness of the mirror dance. The chirps sparkled like the grapes rolling on the table. Every adventure was hidden in their notes. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, their song reached its peak. Bluey stretched his wings wide and let out his longest, happiest chirp. Greenie tapped the bell one last time. Ding! The clear note rang across the garden like a golden ribbon tying the performance together. The garden fell silent for a moment. Then the sparrows chirped loudly in applause. The squirrel clapped its tiny paws. The wind rustled the leaves, as if cheering. Greenie and Bluey looked at each other and laughed. Their concert had been a success. As the light faded into soft twilight, the two friends perched side by side on the branch. Bluey whispered, "This was the best day ever." Greenie nodded, "Yes, but not because of the food, or the toys, or even the music. It was the best day because we shared it together." Bluey smiled. Adventures are fun, but friends make them unforgettable. The two Budgies leaned closer, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The camera slowly zoomed out, showing the glowing garden, the colorful flowers, and the tiny silhouettes of Greenie and Bluey resting peacefully after their long day. Soft music played as the narrator voice concluded. And so, after a day full of laughter and surprises, Greenie and Bluey ended their journey in the garden, surrounded by friends, music, and the magic of togetherness. Their story was not just about adventures but about the joy of sharing life side by side.